All right, so once upon a time there was this fantastic forest that was full of fun-loving forest folk. And it was a particularly religious forest. All of the animals in this forest were driven by some reason to deep meaning searching in their lives. And they created an amazing forest community, though people were pretty separate. And each kind of animal in their own place found the holy where they found it and where they knew it and where they lived it. And so there were birds. There was this huge tree right in the middle of this forest. And in this huge tree, there were birds who flew. And for the birds, the air was the holiest, most divine thing, most amazing thing that they knew. And so they flew in it, and they felt it, and they breathed it, and they felt it puff up their little chests with all the feathers, and they knew it, and they thought it was the most incredible thing. And so they started to pray to it, and they started to dance for it, and they started to sing for it, and it was amazing. And they loved air, these birds. And not 10, 20 feet away down in the earth, there were these worms, big, long worms who loved the earth more than anything else, and they moved through it, and they ate it, and they were eating it while they moved through it. And they thought to themselves, they're incredibly advanced for worms, and they said to themselves, earth is the most incredible thing, we love the dirt. And so they sang songs to the dirt. Little known fact, they have these huge mouths and beautiful singing voices. We just can't see them. And so the worms, they coordinated and they sang these beautiful songs, and they loved earth, and they lifted up earth, and they thought it was the most incredible, beautiful thing. And just 10 feet away there were rabbits, and the rabbits, they had these holes in these burrows, and they loved nothing more than that empty space inside the burrows. Kind of Buddhist, the rabbits were, and they sat in this empty space, and they loved this nothingness, and they didn't want to love it too hard because they didn't want to grasp onto it, but they sat in this empty space, and they thought, nothingness, this space, and that was the most beautiful thing to them. And for a long time, it worked. And it was okay, and everybody got to love deeper and deeper and deeper what they knew. But all of a sudden, there were these frogs that came in to their neighborhood. Tree frogs, fun-loving folk and tree frogs, but the tree frogs had this incredibly different existence because they loved a lot of stuff. Because they knew the tree, and they knew the water, and they knew the earth, and they breathed the air with those big, full things, and they sang those nighttime songs. And they thought all of it was kind of equally holy. They said, we don't want to lift up too much the tree or the earth or the air. And it's all pretty good. And I don't see why you need to lift up and love all those things a little bit more than another. And so they said, okay. So the tree frogs, they kind of loved everything just a little bit equally. And the birds, they were loving the air, and the earthworms loving the earth, and then the rabbits loving the nothingness and the space. And it was fine for a little while, but all of a sudden, people started loving it a little too hard. And their love became this twisted kind of love where they thought that all of the other animals should be loving and praising the same thing that they were loving and praising. And soon, the earthworms looked up to the birds, and they were thinking, shook their heads and shook their tails at the same time, and they're thinking, they just don't understand. To the point where they started to get angry. All the animals started to get angry at all the other animals, and they were thinking that they knew what the best thing, what the most holy thing, the most beautiful thing was. And all of the other animals were wrong. But sure enough, a few animals, a few worms and a few birds, a few of each kind of animal kind of felt a little weird about it, about this swell of this narrow-minded view that was coming at them from all sides. And they got together in secret at first. And they said, a worm said to a bird, said, I think I like the air too. It's all right. It's not my thing. I love the earth a little bit more, but it's okay that you love the air. I'm okay with that. And more animals came, and they said, okay, we're okay with what you love, and we don't need you to love what I love. And so they started organizing, and they came more and more, and they started saying, well, what are we going to pray to? What are we going to sing about? What are we going to lift up? And they looked around them, and they had this big, beautiful tree. And they said, this tree has it all. This tree, the air blows through it, rustles the leaves. This tree reaches down deep into the earth. It knows that goodness that the worms were talking about. This tree held everything that they all wanted to praise. And they said, okay, we're going to worship the tree. And they made new songs, and they sang about the tree, and they danced about the tree, and they loved that tree. But it got a little worse. All of the other factions of animals, they started getting angrier and angrier about other people's beliefs. And they said, these air-loving birds, they're crazy, said the worms, all tightened up. And the birds looked at all these other people, and they said, how can they not taste the air? How can they not know? And it got angrier and angrier. And all of a sudden, our tree-loving group, our interspecies worship community tree-loving group, it was no longer enough for some of them to sing about that tree, for some of them to dance about that tree. And they said one day, a worm, kind of trembling, said, times are getting really tough. It's getting really crazy out there. I'd like to sing to you this song that we used to sing about the earth. And they were a little bit afraid because they were really comfortable singing and praying about that tree, but they were a little worried to introduce some of the other stuff. They said, okay. And the worm started to sing, and his big, beautiful mouth opened, which was weird, but it was beautiful, and he started singing this beautiful song, and others listened, and they said, wow, that's amazing. And then the birds started dancing and singing about the air and singing about what it knew. And the rabbit started sitting and radiating this beautiful essence around him, and he started talking about this nothingness that he knew. And all of a sudden, all of them created this thing that was bigger and more beautiful, held that tree that they were praising together, held that sameness, but each of them were able to sing up and sing out from the truth that they knew, all their own. And they built it, that tree, that interspecies worship community that loved the tree and the air and the earth and loved all things in the nothingness. They built this incredible community that is still in existence today. They laid the foundation of an amazing kind of togetherness. And that is what we're about here. We all come to this Unitarian Universalism from so many different places, having sung, having loved so many different parts of this earth and this being and this truth that we all know a little piece of. And we build here together a place where we worship the whole of it, but where we want to hear individual voices, we want to hear something that maybe is not the exact same way that we would want to sing of the earth. But when we all lift up our voices together, something truly unique happens.